Hello, everybody. So, this is just going to be a final review and overlook of everything we've talked about this term to kind of direct you in certain ways to look back at what we've done so far to get you thinking and ready for the final project, the final paper. Okay. So, now essentially, our final idea is now that we've taken a look at relationships from the sociological perspective, what can we actually change? Okay? So overall in this term, we've taken a look at relationships from a sociological perspective. And broadly, we've looked at four aspects of these relationships and thought deeply through dialogue and essays about what these mean. And kind of as a reference, each of these points refers to one of the essays we've written so far. So if you wanted to take a look back at these, it might help you write the final paper. Okay, so in the first essay and the first part of the class, we took a look at relational being, or how others make us who we are. If you recall, we had the I thou versus the I it relationship. And this recalls folks, if you look back at the early lectures, like Martin Buber, and even to a lesser extent Paulo Freire and Gloria Anzaldúa, who really took seriously the relational part of being, in that because we're always relating with other people, who we are is intimately related with the other person. So the I-thou relationship is a relationship of deep respect with the other person, because they quite literally, and through this relationship, make us who we are. We cannot exist without them. And because of this idea, we talked about this idea of being versus becoming. So because who we are is because the relationship is so important. Who we are is dynamic and changing. Our I is not stable. It's constantly made with another person. So we are never the same person. We're recurringly and constantly changing in our relationships. So we took a look at that in the beginning. One of the other things we took a look at through Foucault in our second set of lectures was looking at social control and primarily the idea of power, right? So the problem we identified then, because the relationship is so important in relational being, we realized then society has a lot of power. Society has power, is one of the things we realized. And because of that, people who influence us, whether it's social media influencers or just the regular media, also have a tremendous amount of power because they actually shape how we understand ourselves. So we began to wonder, can we address change and can we help determine who we are? Because of the social influence that seems so strongly to affect us, can we actually independently decide for ourselves how we want to be, and also decide for our partners, our siblings, our parents, how they should be in relation with each other? Okay? Thirdly, our last section, we took a look at social obstacles to relationships. So because society is so important, we looked at the obstacles that get in our way. So we looked at things like class, gender, race, and how these affect our abilities to relate. Because even if we, as an individual, aren't racist, classist, or sexist, we take place in a society that is. So really, no matter our beliefs, we see that strong social control may influence how we relate with each other. Okay? So we identified hierarchies, another key term here, hierarchies. A gender hierarchy, for instance, would be masculine on top, feminine on the bottom. It's usually a binary where one identity is more important than the other. We identified several of these hierarchies in our society that end up affecting who we are. So with all this final section here, we took a look at Todd May. It's supposed to be Todd May. Todd May's work, who suggested that we could take a look at what we bring with us. We idea our own baggage. So if we recall in our earliest stages and throughout the term, we were thinking about how we relate with each other. But also we were thinking about, this is a suitcase, what sorts of things we carry with us. So gender, race, class, whether we're a student or a teacher. Each of us carry baggage with us, and that interferes and intersects with how we relate with each other. Okay? So Todd May suggested then that we take a look at our baggage, we identify these things, and consider then how we might adjust these with an idea for power. This is primarily lecture 7. Looking at power and trying to identify how these things affect our relationship. So for instance, if we took a look at race, how this race affects this relationship, perhaps this affects this relationship the most because it's an interracial couple. However, if this couple were the same race, maybe gender would be the next power dynamic that affects us the most. Okay? So one of the important things of what Todd May suggests then is by identifying these power structures, we might actually be able to rethink how we structure them. So that's what we're going to do. There's a lot of text here, but this is all going to be reproduced in your assignment. So I'm just going to go over basically what the assignment page says. So basically what we're going to go through is you're going to go through each of the 4 points and think about how we might do what Todd May suggests and rethink about our relationship to make it stronger. Okay? So overall, your goal for this final paper is to identify one of your own relationships that have been impactful for you and start thinking about how power has influenced it and how you might rethink either society or your relationship to make your relationship stronger. So the 4 points, and I have them numbered here, 1, 2, 3, 4. You want to make sure you address each of these 4 points. And you can think about these things in here to get you an idea of what to write. So the first point is looking back at the first part of this of the class, and you can refer back to your discussion points or your first essay, and think about a relationship that's meaningful to you and how that person has helped make you who you are. It'd be helpful to consider someone that has had significant impact in your life. It could be anybody, of course, where it's a sibling, parent, or friend. So think back to the early parts of our class where you identify one of these relationships and think about that one. So as you're writing this could even be heading 1 up here. Heading 2, or the second part of this paper, take a look at possible power differences in the relationship. So it may be helpful to draw out like we had during class. So similar to what I just drew, this power map of a relationship, maybe of you and the other person, and start drawing out one of these power maps and identify things that you bring with you in your relationship. So it may be helpful to write one of those out. So take a look at the possible power differences in the relationship and start thinking about the identities that maybe have been the most impactful. So things like student, child, parent, etc. Which of these things makes the biggest impact on your relationship? Finally, for the third section, identify how this relationship is connected to the broader social context. So think about, in this relationship, what institutions have played the biggest role here. It could be several or it could be one. So for instance, religion, school, or family. It could be any of these. So has religion played a particularly strong influence in a parent-child relationship, how they were raised? Did schooling play a particularly important role? Or perhaps family itself? So think about the social context or the way people see things around you. So we're thinking of the big social picture here. Institutions, the big picture, and society, and how that's affected this relationship. So really focus on this one. Be careful to identify aspects of power and influence that have played the biggest role. So we want to see the biggest influence here. So finally, with this last section, this is where you get to be a little bit creative. You may consider re-looking at or looking at your discussion around Todd May's lecture in number 7 and identify the major intersections of power. So if in the previous one you identified something like religion played the key role, take a look there. And take a look back at what you've written so far in this paper and focus on the particularly important intersections of identity, race, class, gender, so perhaps religion and gender, and think of how you might address the shortcomings. So you could be creative here. So if in your relationship you've noticed that religion had a really strong impact on gender roles in your relationship, if you're thinking about a romantic relationship, then look at this and start thinking about, and broadly, as creative as you want to be, at the personal level perhaps, how you might communicate with this person differently, how you might change the dynamic in the relationship. So if religion has been particularly has been an obstacle, start thinking through how you might change that dynamic, to overcome that. You may even look outside the relationship. So you could look really big. So if religion is the example, perhaps you could look at the particular church or religious belief system and how you might change that bigger institution to make the relationship go more smoothly or be a better relationship. To get closer to that I-thou relationship. So here you're going to look at the big social, political, or economic picture and think about how you could change these things. Again, religion, schooling, politics, etc. And perhaps you may even, finally, you could look for outside sources. So if you're having trouble finding them yourself, or if you want to find a good example, identify some outside sources that might help. So you might look at nonprofits that are doing good work. You might look at a social media influencer or a friend or a celebrity or somebody that might be thinking about this aspect, and pull all these things together and start thinking about solutions. And remember, you can be as creative as you want here and to draw from as many resources as you can. And that could be particular people, or it could even be movies, songs, plays. It could be all sorts of different creative projects, artwork, that maybe depict the ideal relationship that you're looking to move towards.